The next concept is effective population size. And we know that small populations have a higher extinction risk due to inbreeding and genetic drift. The total population size, sometimes called the census size, is sometimes not a good indicator of extinction risk. The real number that matters is called effective population size. And this is the number of breeding individuals, those contributing to the gene pool of the next generation. So the population could be very large, but if only a couple of individuals are breeding and passing their genes on, then that large total population size doesn't really matter. And some species have really weird breeding systems, mating systems, that mean that their population size doesn't always correlate with their effective population size. The effective population size is often much, much lower than the census size. And on average, the effective population size is about 1/10 of the census size. So if you remember, the population size is all of the individuals. The effective population size is only the ones that are breeding. So why is the effective population size less than the total population size? Sometimes there are non-breeders. They're too old, too young, too sick, sterile, too small, too submissive, or unattractive to get a mate. And all of these things can affect whether or not an individual breeds. You can also get unequal sex ratios. So if a few males mate with all the females, then the number of female genes that might get passed on may match what's available in the female part of the population. However, perhaps only a couple of males are fertilizing all those females. That may mean that fewer of the total genes get passed on because the male part is not equally represented among all the different genes. We may have unequal production of offspring. So some parents are just better parents. They may produce more offspring because they take better care of them. Or they may just have genes that help them have more viable eggs or things like that. We also get population fluctuations, and that can affect the effective population size as well. So sometimes we get really unequal sex ratios. So this is an extreme example. These are northern elephant seals that live in California. They're polygamous. Only the dominant males breed. And they fight with each other. You can see all the scars, all this red. This is where they're fighting with their teeth. And these are vicious battles. Sometimes they'll kill the other male. But only the most dominant male gets to breed. And one male can mate with 500 females. So you can see there's a lot of genetic variability potentially among 500 females, but all of those offspring only have genes from one male. So that's a really unequal sex ratio. Usually we're not talking about unequal sex ratios quite that extreme, but this is an example of a real species and how things work with them. So how does the effective population size relate to the census population size when you have unequal sex ratios? So because we have this example where we have 500 females mating with one male, you can imagine we have to somehow estimate what the effective population size is. It's clearly not 500 and it's clearly not 1, but we need to estimate it somewhere in between. So this looks at different ratios of males to females, and you can see that our elephant seals aren't even on here because we have 10 males to 90 females, which is a 1-to-9 ratio. It's not anywhere close to 1 to 500, so our elephant seals are like way, way off on this side of the graph. And we have the effective population size here on the y-axis. The actual population size for all of these is 100. And so we can see here that if we have an equal sex ratio, the effective population size will be equal to the total population size, or the census population size. So 100, 100. If we drop the ratio down to 40 males breeding with 60 females, the effective population size goes down to 96. The actual population size, as I said, for all of these is still 100. And you can see as we increase the skew, so make the sex ratio less equal, the effective population size goes down to, you can see, 100 individuals, actual population size. It's only 36 effective population size if you get down to this 10 males to 90 females. And so the sex ratio becomes very, very important when we're talking about effective population size. The next question is, how small of a population is okay? We went out, we did a survey. We're a little concerned. There's a certain number of individuals, but is that okay? Do we need to do something? So some conservation biologists came up with the 5,500 rule, and it estimates the population size needed to maintain genetic variation in isolated animal populations. And it's based on the breeding of domestic animals, not wild animals. But we can at least make some basic guidelines. These are not perfect, but it's a good kind of rule of thumb. So they say that we need an effective population size of 50 to avoid short-term inbreeding depression, to keep related individuals from breeding with each other, and expressing those deleterious alleles we talked about that could cause disease or other problems. We need at least 50 individuals. The 500 is what we need to avoid genetic drift. And if you remember, genetic drift is the random loss of alleles over time. It doesn't have anything to do with selection or any characteristics of those individuals. It's just losing genes by chance. And that we need 500 individuals breeding to avoid genetic drift over time. And this is based on this mutation drift balance. So we know that new alleles are created via mutation. We've talked about how a lot of those aren't very good mutation, but if we need more alleles to go into the population, the only way that happens is mutation or individuals moving in from another area. So it's estimated that 500 individuals allows the mutation rate to keep up with the genetic drift rate, which means that we come out not losing any genetic information over time if you have at least 500 individuals breeding in a population. Species that are longer lived and are good dispersers can persist for a long time at a small population size. So for vertebrates, a minimum viable population of 500 to 5,000 is common. For short-lived species that are dispersal and limited, you need a higher number of individuals. So for example, for small annual plants, the minimum viable population size is more like 10,000. And you can think about that. A little flower in a field, you're going to want more of those than for birds or bison, right? Like that population of small annual plants just isn't going to make it if it has the same number as there are of bison, right? We also know that dispersal, which creates gene flow, so individuals moving from one area to another area, changes population structure and effective population size.